Hi guys, and welcome to the Unspoken Collective. I'm Steph, and if you're new to the channel or returning, welcome. Today I'm just going to be talking a little bit about what I'm going to bring. So coming from an architectural background, I'm mostly interested in design and heavily, spirituality with astrology in there as well. And over the course of the growth of the channel, I'll be doing videos on how some of these things can interlink along with other things. So today I wanted to talk on the authentic self in particular. Now, what is the authentic self? I just like to state this from the beginning. This is all my own personal take on it. I'm by no means any expert. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. If you're here watching it, I'm sure it's because you've already had some preconceived questions that you are probably looking for answers to. So to me, the authentic self is being completely aware of who you are, and that doesn't just mean your physical self, or your job, your name, age, all of the factual things, the things that go a little bit beyond what we'd say the 3D realm. It's more to do with your unconscious and conscious self in how you think, how you perceive others, and that's whether you know them or not, and how you perceive yourself in relation to that. I really do believe that everything is relative. So in terms of your conscious self and being aware of yourself, it's the idea that you know yourself almost in every situation, given that you'd be a constant, but a constant that's also growing and flourishing, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. So if there are events that you could imagine happening, say you go to a party and I don't know, someone's maybe had a bit to drink and they're looking to pick a fight. It's knowing, even before you even accept the invitation to that party, if you were to interact with that person, you'd make probably the better choice of, trying to avoid them or diffuse any situation before it could blow up into something bigger. Knowing your authentic self is also about knowing who you are and what you want to do to leave a mark in the world, let's say. Your authentic self is you conducting yourself, whether you're alone or in the company of others, and being consistent in your morals, consistent in your way of thinking, and how you interact with the world. This isn't always going to be the same. So this leads me into the next part of ways in which you find your authentic self. If you haven't already, but it's something that you've started to question or begin to understand, this is actually probably the first way in how you find your authentic self. By asking these questions about who you are and what you like, and it can be as simple as that, like your taste in music might change or your clothing style. These are all external and physical, materialistic ways, and by materialistic I mean physical, ways of showing who you are, an outward expression. But there's also the people that you choose to hang around with, or maybe even your profession. Some people know very early on what they'd like to do. Some people it may take more time. And this really does depend on how much you delve into it, the sorts of inner work that you do to begin to find what is your authentic self, and continuing to follow the thing that aligns the most and that brings you, I would say, the most consistent happiness. Happiness is not just one thing. Finding your authentic self doesn't necessarily equate to happiness. It just means being more sure of who you are and how you believe people should be, and exercising that. So the second way of finding your authentic self will be triggering events or something big in your life that causes a lot of change. This quite often can be relationships. I think in this 3D realm, it's the most common way that we understand ourselves, which funny enough is through others. And in relationships, they tend to be the most testing, can be some of the most joyful, and the most revealing. You find out about yourself through your interaction with others. if you're always isolated, it's very easy to make assumptions of who you are and how you will be. Everyone has an idea of how they always think they will be in a relationship. You know, I can be this really great girlfriend or boyfriend, you know, but until you're actually with someone who's throwing a whole other willpower in your way, you won't know how you're going to react until you live through it. And sometimes it's some of the tougher and, let's say, less successful relationships that can actually lead to you finding your authentic self. Let's take the example that you're with someone who could be a little bit controlling or borderline on the narcissistic, but we'll just use the example controlling because that can take us into a very different conversation, and there's a lot of ideas about what narcissism actually is. So let's just say you're with someone that's maybe quite controlling. Now, you may think that you have yourself figured out and you're quite confident in who you are. You get into a relationship with someone and their, you know, behavior or natural way of being or their authentic self is to assert their will on you. Now, you may think, you know, you're someone who's quite sure of yourself, but you could find yourself easily being, you know, detached and consumed within that relationship, or even changing things about yourself to try and, you know, satisfy that person, or thinking, you know, you need to change your hair or go to the gym more or listen to a certain type of music, which just isn't true. A relationship should never change the course of who you are or your authentic self, and the healthy types of relationships should encourage whatever was already there between the two individuals and propel that forward, helping each other, supporting each other. So it's not always easy to see, you know, these things happening, or the controlling issues or whatever in these relationships until after. And sometimes that's quite difficult because you can feel like you've lost some of yourself, or you think, who could I have been if I wasn't in this relationship, for example. But actually, sometimes it's in retrospect that you find, you know, these relationships actually challenged you in some way and made you see something about yourself that you think, do you know what, next time I'm going to make sure I do this differently. Or you change your standards, you change what you accept. And that's another aspect or another facet of the authentic self. You have your own boundaries, your own ideals of morality. And that is, I'd say, one of the most foundational things of, you know, interacting with anyone after, you know, knowing who you are in friendships, working or professional relationships, or intimate relationships, or even with family members as well. Knowing your authentic self is knowing your morals, knowing what works for you, you know, in terms of being productive, of growing every day. And sometimes in retrospect, those less successful relationships are the things that help you look back and grow through these experiences. So that then leads on to people who are watching this video and have maybe already been through some sort of triggering or life-changing event like that. And that leads us to the next part, which is how to continue evolving your authentic self. Now, if you're someone who, like myself, is, you know, largely into spirituality, and by spirituality I mean not, you know, necessarily committing to or belonging to any established religious group or sector, but you do believe in a higher being or higher power, you know, creation of the world, to me, I believe, is a very simple but also very complex thing, and absolutely 100% interconnected with all of us It's how we're able to have any sort of relativity between us, between concepts that we can't even describe in, a physical sense, along those lines. So coming back to, how to find a way to continue evolving that. If you're, meditating, you're having these sorts of discussions with friends or family or loved ones, romantic partners, and you're looking for a way to continue through these without having to go through something, life-altering, because who's trying to bring that sort of karma on themselves, really? I'm not. But, you want to progress, and it's a good thing. I think people need to understand as well, there's never just finding that one ultimate place where you're in stasis all the time. It just isn't natural. We age, we grow, we're going to continue to meet new people, and we have to find ways of making sure that we continue along with whatever work it is that we've done in the past. So, one of the ways in which you can do this is quite simply, forcing, put yourself in new situations. There's a lot that's accessible to us now, whether it's taking up a pottery class, salsa dancing, taking a little weekend trip with friends, family, or a partner. When you put yourself in new settings, you expose yourself automatically to meeting new people. Now, I'm not saying that you have to try and include these people in your life by any means of, long-lasting friendships or anything like that. But what happens is when you do travel or when you do enter into new hobbies and things like that, you begin to meet people with similar mindsets if the things you're choosing to do align with who you are already. We have to accept that we're all in different stages in this life. So by putting yourself in these new environments, you'll automatically be meeting people who have similar or maybe even more experience to offer. So these are ways that you can, find first-hand experience, share ideas and ideals, and have the discussions that would, open your eyes to maybe something new that you never thought you'd like. You could go hiking, meet someone, staying in a lodge or camping or whatever nearby, and they tell you about guitar making, and in a few years' time you become a luthier. It could happen. Another way that you could also continue and to make sure that you're growing is to keep a journal. Now, I know a lot of people already do this or talk about this, but I mean something very fluid. It doesn't even have to be every day. It could just be when you really feel like you need to write something down. This is a good way because when you just write down your honest thoughts, you're not saying it to anyone, and those memoirs, you just look back on yourself. And actually sometimes, from personal experience, you find when you come back to these writings, you already have the answers. Something happens, you find this journal or you pick it up again and you read something and it's like, me 3 years ago already had the answer. But sometimes we can forget because it's not always easy with work and other life stresses. It's never just one straight, narrow journey. Sometimes we have to check in with ourselves. So it's another way, to look back and say, am I still doing this? Am I still in this position? Or have I progressed? So that's another way. And for the last point, another way that you could continue to evolve your authentic self, if you feel you've already found it and are on your way, is by more sacrifice. Now, I know it sounds scary and a little dramatic. It's not like that. What I mean is finding the very quintessential or the very basic things that make you feel proud, content, and at peace with yourself. I won't say happiness, it's at peace. To lay your head down at night and say, yes, I'm doing this, I have this in my life, I'm grateful. The things that make you feel gratitude as well. So let's take this example of the lockdown. If you're watching this, you're still in it, more or less. Or if you're watching this in the future, you'll remember this. Now, this event has come about, a global pandemic. It has been the first of anything on this scale that a lot of us would have lived through. What this hopefully has taught a lot of people is that in this life, there is a lot that we can strip back on. There is a lot that we would have thought we needed, and now we can look and say, actually, we're quite lucky to have it. I know it's there, but do I always need to exercise the power to just have these things? Do these things necessarily bring me the gratitude or the contentment or the happiness or joy that you think it does bring you? Hopefully what this experience has also shown is that self-reflection never stops. Because there are days where you can look in the mirror and be happy with what you see, or days where you can look in the mirror and think something needs to give, something needs to change. What is it that you will continue to be willing to strip back? Because of how this experience is in the 3D, we can get caught up with thinking we need a lot of material things to clad ourselves and build up an authentic self. But if you were to lose everything, and God forbid you do, or hopefully you wouldn't, but if you were to lose everything or have nothing, what is left? What is really you? Because without clothes on your back, without a flashy phone or car or a huge house, without these things, will you still be you? Will you still uphold the boundaries for yourself? Will you still have the same aims and aspirations for yourself? Will you still have the same moral compass? And these are things you need to ask yourself. It's very easy to say it, and I think we can form attachment to things that, and even people, and habits and so forth, that help us to sort of sidestep the work. Or we say, well, I have these and I need to juggle this stuff, and or to have these things I need to do this, that and the other. Do you need to have those things? Which means, do you need to do this? If you can just ask yourself these simple questions every time you progress through life, what are you willing to give up or to shed? And it doesn't mean to say that you have to keep giving away loads of clothes and things like that, or pieces of furniture or items or anything. It's actually quite the opposite. It's just in the first place, what is really necessary? What is necessary and what's an accessory to you as an individual? So hopefully now you have a rough idea of my take on the authentic self, and hopefully you've come away with a better idea if you were beginning to search and ask these questions of self and who you are, or if you're already on this journey, hopefully it's added a little something else for you to go away and think about and continue even more. This probably won't be the first we'll talk on this, because I know I myself am always trying to constantly change, and not to change for change's sake, to change because we are going to keep going through life experiences that will test us and change us, not always in major ways, but small ways, but these small things do add up eventually. And it's just making sure that these changes are all, stacking up in a way that will still reflect what we're hoping to be, or who we're hoping to be, who we'd like to be. So that kind of concludes, this segment for today. If you have any comments or, experiences of your own that you'd like, do leave them below. We'd really appreciate if you could give this video a like and a thumbs up, and share with anyone who you think may need it, or save it for yourself. Save it. It's always good to come back to the channel. So definitely make sure you're subscribed and listen out for anything else that we may be putting out in the future.